Hello. When considering the four-stroke motor, a style of motor used particularly by Japanese automakers during the 80s and 90s, it is particularly important to remember the name Nicholas Otto. This name, which may not ring any bells or flick on any light bulbs at this moment, should be noted because he was the man that first considerably created and harnessed an efficient four-stroke or four-cylinder motor. Thank you all for joining us today. Myself, Patrick Opperman, Chad Pruse, and Derek Haas would like to talk to you guys today, and all of you, about the four-stroke or the four-cylinder motor. The motor in its invention and in its entirety has been particularly useful throughout the past few hundred years for those using automobiles. Automobiles, are very important because they help get us from point A to point B and allow us to travel with much more ease and convenience. Today, I will first cover the intake stroke, and then Chad Pruse will follow me by covering the compression stroke, combustion stroke, and the exhaust stroke. Derek Haas will then follow up Chad Pruse by covering the other necessary components of the engine, which are just as important and must be there for the proper running of the engine. And that will conclude our talk for the day. Thus, let's dive into the intake stroke and get started. As we see here in a small cutout from an engine, we begin by looking at the engine cycle as it begins with the intake stroke. The stroke begins with the piston being pulled toward the crankshaft. As we can see in this picture, the piston has a motion towards the left side of this view, which is towards the counterclockwise double arrows. Thus, when this happens, at this point the intake valve has been opened and the fuel and air drawn past the valve into the combustion chamber, and the cylinder from the intake manifold located on top of the combustion chamber. As we can see here, it has been diagrammed nicely for us in the picture. The intake valve, labeled in red on the right side, is colored red in the drawing, which is opened. The electrical contact is green, and that is also open, and the exhaust valve is closed, and it's blue. And then as we see here in this picture, during this time, the electrical contact switch is open and the exhaust valve is closed, much like shown in this picture. As we see here, the exhaust valve is blue, the electrical contact is green, and the intake valve again is red. And we can see that the piston has been moved towards the crankshaft, and the combustion chamber is full of low pressure fuel and air mixture. Thus, there's this low pressure, which is near atmospheric pressure of the fuel and air mixture. As the piston moves through its motion and goes through its cycle, it moves back towards the starting position and closes the intake valve. Thus, this then completes the intake stroke. And then, as the intake stroke completes, it moves on to the following cycles of the four-stroke cycle of the motor. Sorry for that. Although some engines may rely on the slightly lower pressure in the cylinder during the intake stroke to overcome the strength of the spring holding the valve shut, there are more efficient methods. As noted in the article, four-stroke internal combustion engine on the NASA website from the Glenn Research Center, last updated on June 12, 2014 by Tom Benson, cams and rocker arms provide better control and timing of the opening and closing of the valves. Thus, these engines can be made more efficient by using more parts, which Derek Haas will cover some specific parts of the engine later in this talk. I would like to follow up my portion of this speech by saying thank you for listening, and I'll now hand it off to Chad Pruse so that he can cover the next three portions of the four-stroke motor with you.
Thank you, Patrick. Did any of you know that every second there are multiple explosions underneath the hood of your car? That's right. Your engine compresses a mixture of gas and air each second until it explodes, and the energy from this explosion is then converted into rotational energy. Now we'll take a look at the last three types of strokes that occur inside the internal combustion engine. Ever since I was a little kid, car engines have always interested me. And I've always worked under the hood of a car with my dad ever since I can remember. Engines are still of interest to me, so I've since kept the knowledge of engines current via many different magazines and websites. In order for one to understand how an engine works, it is necessary to first understand the different mechanical strokes that occur inside an internal combustion engine. We'll now go through the last three mechanical strokes that occur inside these internal combustion engines. All these mechanical strokes are according to a 2000 article on the How Stuff Works website. Second type of stroke after the initial stroke that Patrick talked about is the compression stroke. This occurs after the intake stroke. The piston moves up to compress the fuel and air mixture. This compression makes the explosion more powerful. The next type of stroke that occurs is called the combustion stroke. This occurs after the compression stroke that I just talked about. Once the piston reaches the top of the cylinder, the spark plug creates a spark that ignites the fuel and air mixture. This explosion then drives the piston downward. The last type of stroke that occurs after the combustion stroke is the exhaust stroke. After the piston reaches the bottom of the cylinder, the exhaust valve at the top of the cylinder opens and allows the exhaust gas to exit the cylinder and go out the tailpipe of the car. I'll now show you a picture of what this demonstration looks like. As you can see here, the first stroke, then the second stroke, which is a compression stroke, then the combustion stroke, then the exhaust stroke. I will now pass it on to Derek to talk about some other parts of the engine that allow it to run smoothly and efficiently. Derek?
So now that we've all talked about the 4 different cycles of the engine and how the engine and basics of how the engine will work, I'm going to continue talking about a couple extra parts of the engine that help the engine run smoothly and efficiently. The first other part of the engine that I will talk about is the camshaft. The camshaft spins down the center of your engine along with the crankshaft. Now the crankshaft spins one time per cycle per each cycle of the engine, and the camshaft spins about half of that speed, so it will spin 2 times per each cycle. Now the camshaft is a shaft that runs down the center of your engine, and it has a timing. It controls timing of opening and closing of exhaust and intake valves of the engine. And this is important because they open and close at pivotal times to ensure that inside there, that the mixture of air, or the gas to air mixture, is primed for igniting, so the engine has power and efficiency. And along with the valves, the camshaft also controls another part that I will talk about, and that is the distributor and distributor cap. The distributor is a part of the ignition system of your car. So once you start your car, that electricity from the battery that you've started goes in, eventually goes to a couple other parts, but then it goes to the distributor. Now the distributor generates high voltage electricity, and that distributing cap sends that to the spark plug. Now it's in timing with the camshaft, so that the timing, it's on timing, because that way the spark will ignite when that mixture to gas to air is in prime condition for igniting, so that it's most efficient. And now that all these processes that we've talked about today generate a lot of heat, in which heat powers your car, that explosion of gas to air, igniting that powers cars, and we get heat. We all know, we've all driven cars here today, and we all know that your engine gets hot and overheats sometimes if everything's not running as it should. And that brings me to the cooling system of your car, or the radiator. Now the radiator is the front part of your car, and you can see it through your grills of your car. And it works, so there's fluid all around your engine and in your engine. Now that fluid heats up and absorbs the heat from your engine, so that the fluid gets hot and so it draws the heat away from your engine. Now once that heat and that fluid gets too hot, there's a thermostat in your engine that will then direct the coolant to the radiator. Now the radiator is essentially just a box in the front of your car. It's a box shaped part of that engine, and it's got hollow aluminum tubes that run all the way down through the radiator. So the hot coolant comes into the radiator, and air passing by as you're driving, or there's a fan up front if you need more air to go through there, cools the aluminum tubes and the aluminum parts of the radiator, and that will in turn help cool down this coolant that has been heated from the engine. Now this will make the air hot. This will turn the air that's passing through it hot, which will transfer that heat from the coolant to the air. Now once the coolant leaves the radiator, it becomes cooler than when it entered, then goes back in your engine so that your engine can run smoothly and keeps it cool and a nice temperature for it to work at. So now that we've all talked to you today about the different strokes of the engine and different cycles of your engine, and a couple of different parts to help your engine run smoothly, there are many other parts to your engine that we could be talking about here all day. And not many people know all their parts of their engine and how their car actually works, but we all drive them every day, and they're a very important part of our lives. And we're hoping that from our presentation that you guys can now have a little understanding that if you do need to pull over and your car is running funny, that if you look underneath your hood, you will kind of have some understanding and some background of how your engine would work, and so that you could use your knowledge to the best of your ability. We would like to thank everyone of you for listening to our presentation.